Hello everyone and welcome back to AP Bio with AP Playground. Today we're covering the last topic in Unit 8, Ecology, and also the last topic in all of AP Bio, Topic 8.7, Disruptions in Ecosystems. Today we're going to be looking at all of the disruptions to ecosystems, which range from invasive species to human disruption to geological and meteorological events. And our suggested skills, statistical tests, and data analysis, 5D, use data to evaluate a hypothesis or prediction, including rejecting or failing to reject the null hypothesis. So we've already discussed this, but sort of to reiterate, there are variations in population. These are random that happen through mutations. These are pre-existing, just inherited genetically, but there are variations in populations, and some individuals are going to be better adapted to their environment, and those are the individuals that are going to reproduce. Mutations are also random, but they can be beneficial to an organism in an environment. And so due to these adaptations, due to natural selection, due to natural selection also acting on beneficial mutations, organisms over time become very well adapted to their environments, very well adapted. But what happens if the environment suddenly changes is now they're at risk. There's a chance that they are not able to adapt to this new environment. And so especially if this happens over a very short amount of time, very sudden environmental change, that doesn't allow for evolution to take place. And so these are both natural and human-driven changes. And I included this picture over here to kind of preface the whole climate change disrupting environments, including within polar ice caps and causing ice to melt, and that's removing a habitat from certain populations, which is then going to cause them to not have a place to live. But we'll begin with invasive species, which are non-native plants, animals, or pathogens that when introduced to a new environment, they usually cause harm to the environment. And because they're new to the environment, that means they generally don't have any predators, and they're able to fill a new niche. They have their own role within the environment, where they're free from predators, and they can generally outcompete native species if they're suited to that environment better than the native species are. They are invasive species. They're not from that environment, but other species haven't had time to adapt when they're introduced to a new environment. And so this introduction to environments can be intentional and non-intentional, but oftentimes it is due to humans. And so we look over here at this plant called the kudzu plant, which is a fast-growing invasive vine native to East Asia that has become a problem in the southeastern U.S. And it was introduced to the U.S. in the late 19th century because it helped control erosion. It was a forage crop, but its rapid growth and ability to smother other vegetation have made it an ecological pest, essentially. It's now an invasive species because even though it was introduced into the U.S. in the purposes of helping with erosion control, it was able to outcompete native species, is free from predators, and now it's kind of growing everywhere, and nothing is stopping it naturally. Another very human activity-based environmental disruption is habitat loss, where habitats are destroyed and they're often replaced by monocultures, which is when there are crops, or even if it's like restoration of a forest, for instance, all of the trees are going to be the same type, and a monoculture is going to have a low biodiversity compared to a diverse ecosystem where there are multiple different species, and so the ecosystem is at risk even after restoration has happened or after the ecosystem and the habitat has been replaced with, for instance, the same crop for farming. So this includes logging, which is a form of habitat loss, urbanization, where we're building cities on animals' habitats, monocropping, like we discussed, where the entire farmland is turned to a singular crop, which now cannot protect itself. There's no more genetic variation within the population. And we also see habitat fragmentation, where, for instance, a habitat could be broken up, so it remains, but there is now a gap between it. For instance, the building of a bridge or a road through a certain habitat, and this is going to break up the gene pool. It splits up the population, and that's going to lower diversity because now there can no longer be intermingling between these areas because the habitat has been fragmented. Global climate change is another huge environmental disruption. And this is climate change is a directional change in the global climate, and this is generally going in the direction of warming. And although this is somewhat occurring naturally, this is also largely due to human activity releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere through burning fossil fuels. So what happens here is the sun is beating down rays on the earth, and a lot of them are reflected back by the atmosphere. But greenhouse gases, which are released through burning of fossil fuels and through factories, they're going to absorb the heat, and so the heat isn't bouncing back, and so it'll stay absorbed within the atmosphere and just warm the planet. And this is going to lead to further habitat loss, like we discussed about melting of ice. There's going to be changes in temperature that some animals may not be able to survive, such as coral bleaching, and there's also going to be changes in soil composition, which can also affect organisms that live there. We can also talk about geological and meteorological events that also affect habitat distribution and also can disrupt ecosystems. We have El Nino, which is a completely natural occurrence. It's a very, it can be measured. It's a changing weather pattern that happens every so often, every 5 to 7 years, but it still disrupts the ecosystems and environments when it happens. We also see continental drift, another very natural occurrence, geological occurrence that continents are always spreading out and moving apart from each other, starting from our supercontinent of Pangaea, but continuing to spread apart. And now we have our 7 continents that are continuing to slowly, very slowly get further away from each other. But as they're moving around, this can affect climate, this can affect species distribution. And so this is a very, very slow affecting of ecosystems, but it still will disturb ecosystems over time. We also see the meteor impact on dinosaurs, for instance. That was a meteorological event where when the meteor hit Earth and all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but dinosaurs are starting to go extinct because of the disruption of that meteor. So there are natural disruptions to ecosystems, but at the same time, there are a lot happening very rapidly now that is especially due to human activity, including habitat loss, including global warming. And so lastly, I want to talk about extinctions, and human activities that we discussed can cause extinction along with disrupting ecosystems. And the extinction is when the entire species is going to die out. So some examples of this: transmission of infection across the Atlantic by humans has resulted in Dutch elm disease in America and the potato blight in Europe. So when humans transmit infections due to their traveling, all of a sudden we're disrupting ecosystems and we're introducing infections that can lead to extinction of certain species. There's biomagnification, which is toxins that cannot be broken down biologically become more concentrated in successive trophic levels. So for instance, when pesticides are going to be sprayed on plants, these are toxins that cannot be broken down biologically, and as a result, the animals that then eat those plants are going to get those toxins within their systems, and the animals that eat those animals are going to get toxins within their systems. And if we look at the trophic level, we look at trophic levels, and we have our secondary consumer here, this fox. It's going to need to eat a lot of squirrels in order to obtain the energy that it needs, because at each level, only 10% of energy is transferred, and the rest is lost as heat. And so squirrels, same thing, will need to eat a lot of plants in order to get the energy they need. So what happens is there's an accumulation of toxins, and it's going to be more concentrated within higher trophic levels, because these higher trophic levels are going to need more of the lower trophic levels, and these lower trophic levels are going to be consuming more producers that are going to have these toxins within them. There's also eutrophication, where water bodies become excessively enriched with nutrients, leading to harmful algal blooms and oxygen depletion, which can harm aquatic life. And this is accelerated by human activity, by agricultural runoff. So what happens when runoff occurs? It's raining, and fertilizer moves with this water off of farms and into bodies of water, and that's going to result in insane growth of algae, but that's going to block the sunlight. And so organisms that live below that algae, that aren't going to be able to reach their sunlight, that aren't going to have enough oxygen anymore to survive, they are going to die. And so human activities are a major contributor to a lot of ecosystem disruption, and can even lead to extinction. But of course, like we looked at that meteor in the last slide, natural events can also cause extinction. So reviewing 8.7, organisms are well adapted to their environment, but these environments, these ecosystems, due to sudden changes, can be disturbed, and organisms won't be able to adjust fast enough. And these include invasive species, habitat loss, and climate change, which are largely human-driven. And humans can cause extinction through things like biomagnification and eutrophication. But lastly, there are also geological and meteorological events that can cause extinction and can disrupt environments, but are not due to human activity. So this was it for AP Bio, and we'll see you in the Unit 8 review.